We did it, Reddit! Nvidia was so embarrassed by the specs of the RTX 4080 12GB that they unlaunched it. And now in its place, we've got the RTX 4070 Ti. It's the same GPU, but with a different name. Oh. But it got a $100 price drop, which unfortunately isn't quite the W that you might think it is. While theoretically there will be 4070 Ti's for $700, there are no first-party Founders Edition cards, meaning that MSRP is really just that, a manufacturer's suggested retail price. And later, we're gonna get into why no one really follows Nvidia's suggestions anymore. The card that we were sent for review, for example, is lightly overclocked and costs $850 US, meaning that I kind of have to evaluate this as a 4080 12GB with a name change and a 5.5% discount. This thing better be amazing. Amazing, like our sponsor.
Ridge Wallet. Ridge Wallet has redefined the traditional wallet with its compact frame and RFID blocking plates. Keep your wallet bulged down and use our offer code Linus to save 10% and get free worldwide shipping.
Right out of the gate, the 4070 Ti is in trouble, with specs that I might have imagined on a 4070 or even a 4060 Super. That puts its total bandwidth somewhere in between the RTX 3070 and 3070 Ti. So its only chance is if its other specs can pick up the slack. Fortunately, on paper, the 4070 Ti's core performance should contribute to a sizable uplift. It has 25% more CUDA cores than its predecessor, and they're clocked substantially higher. That's a good sign even before the architectural improvements thanks to its Ada Lovelace cores. This means improved ray tracing and tensor cores and shader execution reordering, which optimizes the order of the data sent to the ray tracing cores. Nvidia called this as big an innovation for GPUs as out-of-order execution was for CPUs. Though, if our recent poll is any indication, most of you won't be making use of it anytime soon. Of course, how would you, given the ongoing popularity of the 10 series GPUs, which are turning 7 years old this year? Nvidia's marketing push for the 4070 Ti is that it makes for a great upgrade from 10 and 20 series GPUs, which, okay, Nvidia, let's play along with that for a moment. Compared to the GTX 1080 and 1080 Ti at 4K, we are looking at a staggering 2 to 3 times improvement in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, taking us from sub 60 FPS averages to over 100. Modern Warfare 2 is even more impressive at up to 4.5 times the performance. We're talking cinematic to playable just like that. 1440p does give our 10 series cards a better chance, but we're still looking at 2 to 4 times the performance in both of these games, making this truly an incredible upgrade over the 10 series GPU. No, this is stupid. I don't need to spend $850 to upgrade a 7-year-old card. Ah, that's better. To see how it really competes, we tested the RTX 4070 Ti not against what Nvidia wants, but against a truly intimidating stack of GPUs. As an FYI, even though our review was so recent, we sanity checked our RX 7000 series GPU results, since driver updates have actually changed their performance characteristics since launch. We've also revalidated any of the numbers that we've reused, and we'll talk a bit more about our plans for our GPU testing methodology in a future video. Even with the full lineup, Shadow of the Tomb Raider has the 4070 Ti within about 8% of the RTX 3090 Ti, which is a fairly impressive achievement considering that it is nominally a 70 series GPU. What's more impressive, though, is that it gets handily beat by the RX 7900 XT. Yes, I'm aware that that GPU costs $50 more, but it's the beginning of a pattern that repeats itself. First, in F1 2022, where the 4070 Ti gets stomped well beyond what that price difference would suggest, starting the 4070 Ti off on pretty rocky ground. Hitman 3 continues this floundering performance with frame rates nearly on par with the 3090 Ti, but well off of AMD and the RTX 4080 that it used to share a name with. And it's really more of the same story with Red Dead Redemption 2, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Modern Warfare 2, and Cyberpunk. though Cyberpunk is more of a beatdown thanks to that game's memory-hungry nature, we think. Thankfully for Nvidia, Forza Horizon 5 gives the 4070 Ti some breathing room as it meets or beats the 7900 XT and even beats the 3090 Ti, though it's still a good 13% off of the real 4080. It's a really good thing that they changed that naming. For 4K gaming then, the RTX 4070 Ti ends up firmly behind both of AMD's Radeon 7000 series and everything from Nvidia from the 3090 Ti and up, which seems to suggest that Nvidia basically looked at 3090 Ti pricing on eBay and said, about like that sounds good. Maybe things will look a bit better at 1440p. And they kinda do. Now that memory bandwidth is less of an issue, Shadow of the Tomb Raider sees the 4070 Ti pull ahead of the 3090 Ti and close the gap on its bigger siblings, though it still falls behind AMD, if only slightly. Hitman sees the 4070 Ti backsliding a little in relation to the 7900 XT, while maintaining its performance improvement over the 3090 Ti, but this doesn't carry over into Cyberpunk, Modern Warfare 2, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where we're looking at pretty much the same relative performance as our 4K tests. Forza, however, picks up spectacularly, with the 4070 Ti sitting firmly in third place, contributing to a generally rosier picture at 1440p overall. With roughly equal performance to a 3090 Ti then, and a small enough gap from the 7900 XT, it looks almost compelling in this overpriced GPU hellscape. And that's before we turn on ray tracing, which works fine, right? I mean, we knew it would be superior to the 7900 XT since that's a stronghold for Nvidia at this point. But what was surprising is that it wasn't by as much as we expected. I was shocked to see the 7900 XTX actually outperform it at 4K in everything except for Cyberpunk, where the ray tracing cores seem to be doing a better job, potentially thanks to SER. At 1440p, things again get a bit better for the 4070 Ti with only a mild loss against the 7900 XTX and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and overall better performance in the rest of the suite. Cyberpunk hits AMD even harder here, but that doesn't help the 4070 Ti against its own brothers, who pull away significantly. That weak memory bandwidth seems to be really holding it back here. Interestingly, when we turned on DLSS 3.0 to test if the 4070 Ti's diminished tensor core count would prevent it from keeping up, it did just fine in Cyberpunk with a similar performance uplift to the 4080 and the 4090. But then we did not see the same thing in F122. We tried a bunch of different settings here, and nothing we did changed the outcome at all. We think this could be a driver issue, considering that Cyberpunk of all games is fine, so we've reached out to Nvidia about it to see what they have to say. If they respond in time for this video, we'll have their response on screen right now, and I'll just use this time to tell you all about how delicious water tastes from your LTTstore.com water bottle. It's great. In ray tracing then, the 4070 Ti is looking a lot like an RTX 3090 Ti when we look at the overall picture. And as expected, ray tracing performance for the price is superior to anything from Team Red. Unfortunately for Nvidia, the vast majority of our viewers have never once enabled ray tracing, and under 15% of you actively use it. So, at least for you guys, it might not be the trump card that they were hoping it would be. What might be though is productivity. Because remember, as much as we like to talk about games, these GPUs, for a lot of people, end up used for work too. Starting with Nvidia's current ace in the hole, Blender, the 4070 Ti manages a solid 43% improvement over its predecessor, but falls behind the RTX 3090 Ti and especially the RTX 4080, with performance against the latter being a mostly linear relationship with the difference in ray tracing core count. Things pick up a little with Procyon, with the video editing suite giving the 4070 Ti very close performance against the 3090 Ti, though still slightly behind both Radeon 7000 series cards. Photo editing is interesting, however. Most of the results are within a couple of percentage points, which seems to suggest that any modern GPU will be sufficient. But this doesn't tell the whole story. As more machine learning effects and filters trickle into your workflow, you can expect to see these numbers change, and it could be a pretty solid advantage for Nvidia. DaVinci Resolve gives the 4070 Ti's NVENC encoders a run for their money, with what looks to be a memory bandwidth bottleneck slowing it down considerably next to its bigger siblings. It manages to be a little bit faster than its bandwidth difference would suggest, but this unfortunately means that out of our test suite, it only really beats the RTX 3060 in export speed. Topaz AI, though, is a better story for the 4070 Ti, where its enhanced core architecture makes shorter work of this GPU workload than even the RTX 3090 Ti, though AMD is the one who ends up stealing the show here, with even the last-gen 6900 XT putting up comparable numbers. The spec suites are another strong suit for Nvidia ever since the 20 series, and the RTX 4070 Ti trades blows with the 3090 Ti in a lot of these tests, which is a good thing. Unfortunately though, there are cases like 3ds Max and SolidWorks that give the 4070 Ti some trouble, likely again thanks to its relative shortage of cores and limited memory bandwidth. However, energy and medical end up being standout wins for the 4070 Ti, and in all cases it's substantially faster than the RTX 3080, let alone the 3070 Ti. That ignores AMD of course though, whose cards all spank it across the board with the exception of 3ds Max. Siemens NX, as usual, will be ignored in our final performance tallies since this version is old enough to not have proper support for Nvidia GPUs, but we're putting the data in here in case you're interested. Finally, the 4070 Ti outperforms the RTX 3090 Ti in every part of Spec Workstation, although as with ViewPerf, AMD maintains big wins over all of Nvidia's cards across most of the suite, with the exceptions of Media and Entertainment and GPU Compute. So much for that stronghold. Overall performance looks like a 3090 Ti, but at a lower cost and hopefully a lower power draw. But it really does depend on what you're doing. If you're into 3D rendering or GPU compute, you're gonna get a lot more bang out of a 4070 Ti than the 3090 Ti, which could make it an attractive option for the price and hopefully the power draw. If you're into video editing, however, it's not a worthy upgrade over even the 3070 Ti, and you might want to consider a 7000 series Radeon instead if you need a new GPU today, preferably one with hardware AV1 encoding support. So if we're looking at an RTX 3090 or 3090 Ti equivalent here, surely the 4070 Ti should be more energy efficient too. Well, in MSI Combustor, it pulled the lowest out of not only the 40 series family, but also when compared to AMD's price competitors, hovering at around 280 watts most of the time and never breaking past its 285 watt rating. When we switch to a more real-world test, F122, the story stays pretty much the same, this time with the card hovering at around 275 watts. That is well within spec, even though our card is a factory overclocked model. It's worth noting, by the way, guys, that in our Radeon RX 7900 series review, we made a mistake when we changed the way that we collected our data, and we initially showed total graphics power and total board power in the same chart. Those measurements are not comparable. So this time we are strictly using total board power, and in the future we're planning to use external equipment for better accuracy than board sensors or Nvidia's PCAP. Stay tuned for that. When we zoom in on our power consumption results for Forza Horizon 5 at 1440p, the power consumption without a frame rate cap is pretty much in line with the RTX 4080, which actually is not a great thing considering that it ran about 5 to 10 FPS slower. However, when we cap the frame rate to 100, it actually lines up so perfectly, I almost thought the graph only had 3 lines. AMD's cards, by comparison, ran about 30 to 50 watts higher most of the time. That works out to about 17 watts per frame less than the Radeon 7900 XT when it's uncapped, and a good 35 watts when capped. Not a bad efficiency story. And no high idle power consumption bugs when connected to different monitors, like we saw with AMD's 7000 series. Now, thermals are going to be a difficult conversation since there isn't a reference or a founder's edition of the RTX 4070 Ti with a standard cooler for us to test. With that in mind then, take these results with a grain of salt. Starting with Combustor, it's not looking great for our tough OC edition of the 4070 Ti, which quickly ramps up past 80 degrees and holds there throughout our run. This is well above the RTX 4080 with its founder's cooler, and more in line with the 4090. F122 pushes the 4070 Ti even higher relative to the 4090, sticking again to around the 80 degree mark. To be clear, this isn't the end of the world as long as the core clocks are high and stable at these temperatures. And high they probably will be. I suspect that the only 4070 Ti's that you will find readily available at launch will be factory overclocked like ours, which managed among the highest clocks that we've ever seen on a GPU, even though it can't maintain full boost in Combustor and has a little bit more wobble than the RTX 4080. It's worth saying again though that your mileage will vary depending on a given card's cooling setup and VBIOS. F122 is a more realistic load and sees that variation calm down a bit with the 4070 Ti, with it regularly hitting our factory overclocked card's 2.7 GHz boost clock. But again, your mileage may vary once the first summer heat wave strikes, because as you guys saw, we're flying pretty close to the sun on our thermals, and that's in a temperature-controlled room. As the saying goes, there's no such thing as a bad product, only a bad price. So it's time to talk about that. Originally announced at $900 as the RTX 4080 12GB, the current starting price, now that it is the 4070 Ti, is $800. That's $100 less. But not only is that $200 higher than the RTX 3070 Ti MSRP was at launch, that price only barely puts it in a competitive position against the Radeon RX 7900 XT in typical raster gaming, and it's not even guaranteed to net you 60 FPS if you do turn on ray tracing, making some flavor of DLSS a necessity unless you want to dial back the settings. On an $850 card? It's still a lot for what by its name should be a high mid-range GPU, not a step-down enthusiast class one. So how does Nvidia justify its astronomical price tag for a 70 series GPU that, as we said before, really seems more like a 60 Super? To put it bluntly, they don't. And as far as they're concerned, they shouldn't have to. I mean, you think they renamed the RTX 4070 Ti out of the goodness of their hearts and it was a big win? No. Up until literally just last week, it was still up in the air whether Nvidia would drop the price at all compared to the announced $900 price for the RTX 4080 12GB. It took their business partners begging and pleading with them to make that happen. And that was in spite of the reportedly atrocious sales figures for the RTX 4080 and the Radeon 7900 XT's existence at that very same price point. It's good they yielded, but they still have more work to do. Nvidia reportedly offered partners some compensation for the work involved in the rebranding, but at this point, we haven't heard confirmation that they intend to do the same for this new MSRP. That means that if this chart showing the meager scraps of margin that Nvidia leaves for its partners is to be believed, any MSRP cards that you see are going to be very limited in stock and essentially just for show, so that media like us will be suckers and talk about how this card is $799. Board makers, like any other business, are not going to go out of their way to lose money if Nvidia hasn't adjusted the pricing. Asus's top-end Strix 4070 Ti then is just $150 less than a 4080 Founders Edition, making even that card look good by comparison. Reports from Asus suggest that the Tough OC will be the most plentiful SKU, but from conversations we've had with Memory Express here in Canada, that's actually been the opposite for the rest of the 40 series lineup, where almost no Tough cards exist. So what it looks like is Nvidia is pointing at the price saying, but it can't be expensive. We set it at $799, see? But the partners have absolutely no way of achieving that in the real world. I'm having a hard time figuring out Nvidia's game here, to be honest with you. The GPU market has reportedly hit a 20-year sales low thanks to a combination of high prices, the mining crash, and extenuating economic circumstances. And yet, Nvidia seems determined to pour water on the fire, expecting a huge premium even on products in the high/mid tier of their product stack. I mean, don't forget, as much as we focus on desktop GPUs and PC gaming on this channel, the real competition for a card like this could easily be an Xbox or a PlayStation 5, either of which would frankly be a much more compelling value to the average gamer. And I feel like Nvidia, if they don't turn things around, is at risk of losing PC gaming customers long-term to the console side. It's starting to almost look like a Microsoftian good, bad, good cycle that they've been on for the last few years here. 10 series was great, 20 series was a wet fart, 30 series kickstarted a whole new generation of PC gamers, in spite of the pandemic price hikes, and as product development cycles run for longer and longer with each new generation, the impact of this kind of please people 50% of the time, piss them off 50% of the time, starts to become more dramatic, and Nvidia clearly hasn't learned their lesson yet. I mean, Apple and Tesla have proven that people will still buy your product even if you treat them badly. But that only holds true if you have the absolute best products on the market. It doesn't build loyalty. So this strategy around the 4070 Ti, and especially the 4080, clearly isn't it for the long term. It is time for Nvidia to focus on squeezing out margins less and delighting customers more. Now, AMD is not innocent here, to be clear. While the RX 7900 series is a better value than the 4080, the 4070 Ti is content to price itself right in line with its performance against the 7900 XT, a card that also should probably be more like $700 considering its 80 class performance level. Nvidia enabled AMD then to charge more themselves through their own astronomical pricing, and AMD is in turn enabling Nvidia to normalize those prices by providing a comparably fair price on this step-down product, which Nvidia can then compete with as they both run down the stack. As long as this continues, and as long as Nvidia keeps trying to kill Moore's law in the collective consciousness, things are never going to change. Nowhere is this attitude more apparent than Nvidia's positioning for the RTX 4070 Ti. Not as competition for AMD, or even against a 30 series card, but as an upgrade from 20 series and 10 series GPUs. And I mean, yes, it is an upgrade, but it would also be an upgrade over a toaster or a literal potato, especially if that potato is 7 years old. I mean, even an ARC GPU would be an upgrade over a 10 series most of the time. So what's your point, Nvidia? Final word then. It's a good product at a bad price from a company that is failing more and more to hide its ugly nature. You're gonna buy it. You always do. And you know what? You'll probably be happy with it. But I don't have to be happy about that. What I am happy to tell you about is our sponsor,
Jackery. Jackery makes solar-ready portable power stations designed to improve outdoor life by providing power outdoors whenever and wherever you need it. Before, they used to use maple syrup for that. Their new Solar Generator 1000 Pro is their fastest solar and wall recharging generator yet, boasting 3 times faster charging than the normal SG-1000. It consists of a Jackery Explorer 1000 Pro portable power station and 80-watt solar panels. Plug it into the wall and get a full charge in under 2 hours and deliver up to 100 watts of power thanks to the new 100-watt power delivery ports. So check out the new Jackery Solar Generator 1000 Pro at the link below.
If you guys enjoyed this video, go check out our review of the Radeon 7000 series for a little more on what Nvidia is up against this generation. AMD seems to be catching up, slowly, but surely, even if they too cost a fortune.